Darmish, any news on an attacking player for Arsenal?
No, I mean, I know that our Arsenal fans will be, why haven't they signed a striker? We've got to remember, I think this has been influenced by the fact that a lot of other clubs are doing their business really, really early. That's not to say Arsenal shouldn't have done it early. There's still so many days left in this transfer window for Arsenal to sort out what looks like their priority position and try and sort out this striker. It's clear that they do want to bring one in. It's clear that at the moment, Benjamin Sesko and Viktor Gyokeres are two of the ones that they have been looking at, two of the ones that they have been discussing internally, and whether they're looking at Gyokeres as almost like the ready-made guy to come in his mid to late 20s, been in England once before, albeit in the Championship, and then scored all those goals for Sporting, or whether they look at Benjamin Sesko and think, do you know what, early 20s, quite raw, but we've seen enough for him for us to believe that he's got a really, really high ceiling. So at the moment, it looks like a choice between those two, but maybe Arsenal are playing a clever game there and all of the attention has been on these two. Maybe there's another player that we haven't been talking about that Arsenal may be working on. But as far as we're aware, the information we're getting, it seems to be one of Sesko or Viktor Gyokeres. And I can't stick my head out there. I mean, I think they will sign a striker in this transfer window. They clearly have been looking. It's not a case of why haven't they signed a striker in the last few windows. They probably just haven't found the right deal. Arsenal are very, very careful when it comes in the transfer window, and they will pay what they believe to be the right market price for a player. So if the deal doesn't work for them, they are always prepared to walk away. They won't pay over the odds. So hence why they'll probably just take their time, which they can do because we're still so early in this window.
Dan, your thoughts on the Arsenal striker search? What's that meme from Titanic when she goes, the old lady?
It's been 84 years.
Feels a bit like that with the Arsenal striker search. What are your thoughts? Sesko, Gyokeres, one of those two?
I mean, yeah, as Darmish says, they certainly seem to be the direction of travel. I mean, I think Arsenal would love Alexander Isak, for example, someone who we know can do it in the Premier League. But
that's it, I'm out.
Thought that might happen. But the good news is, Pete, they're just not going to be able to get him out of Newcastle. So, it looks like one of these players who perhaps, are both risks in their own way. As Darmish says, Gyokeres scored an enormous amount of goals for Sporting over the last couple of seasons and is in his prime. He's 27. He's got a bit of experience in English football, but you're never quite sure when you're buying a player from, say, the Portuguese league or perhaps the Netherlands, whether they're going to be able to adapt to the Premier League. And then Sesko, who's much more raw. I think he's 22, so there's a high ceiling there. But again, you're effectively bringing in a young player into a position where there's an incredible amount of expectation. If you're the centre forward for Arsenal, as Kai Havertz will testify, and you miss a big chance or you go a couple of games, without a goal, looking quiet, then there's a hell of a lot of scrutiny on you. So it's not an easy role to fill, but I do look at that and think Arsenal dropped the ball over the last couple of windows. I think I could make a pretty compelling case that the lack of a centre forward was the big reason they didn't go deeper in the Champions League and FA Cup and perhaps come closer to winning the Premier League or even winning the Premier League last season. There's a case, I think, that Arteta got too ultra focused on it being defensively solid and hard to beat, and the club took their eye off this glaring hole in the squad that was eventually kind of filled mainly by two midfielders, Havertz and Moreno over the course of the season.
Yeah, incredible situation. You talk about being defensively sound. I mean, they've got two of the best centre-backs there, Doms, haven't they, in Gabriel and Saliba. But Christian Mosquera, the latest player to be linked, a young centre-back from Valencia. What's your thoughts on this one? What's your take? What's the latest?
Yeah, I mean, this one they're working on. They've been looking at this player actually for the last couple of years. So it's not just someone that's come in to Arsenal's thinking. Valencia central defender, right-sided central defender. He's got a year left on his contract, so Arsenal probably think they can get a good deal done here. And it just strengthens the squad positioning in the central defensive area. Yes, we know that they've got Gabriel and we know that they've got William Saliba, but I think Mikel Arteta has been stung in the past when one of those two players has been injured. They have improved their squad with regard to replacements if either of those do get injured, much more than they were able to do 2 or 3 seasons ago when they missed out the first time in that title race against Manchester City. But I think they've got players who can play across the back in the likes of Ricardo Calafiori and Ben White. But I think there was a feeling at Arsenal that maybe they just need to strengthen in that position with a player who is basically a central defender by trade. And that's his position. They've got Saliba, as I mentioned, Gabriel and Kivior in there, and adding Mosquera into that mix as well is just going to just complete that jigsaw at the back. They're trying to do the same thing in midfield with regard to Zubimendi and Nørgaard, maybe a goalkeeper as well in Kepa. That one looks like it's going to happen. And then what we've been talking about in the last few minutes and in the last 500 transfer windows, fill in that gap in the number 9 position.
And do you agree, Doms, that with Nørgaard arriving, Zubimendi about to sign on the dotted line, and is this spell the end for Thomas Partey?
Yeah, this is a surprise, actually, because the noises we were getting towards the end of the season were it looks likely that Thomas Partey was going to stay and he was going to sign a new contract with Arsenal. Of course, it's about to expire now officially. But now with Nørgaard coming in, it would point towards the fact that Arsenal and Thomas Partey and his representatives haven't been able to come up with an agreement, whether that was on the financial side of a contract or the length of contract itself. And we do know that there are a number of European clubs and clubs in Saudi Arabia who have approached Partey's representatives. So he has got a lot of options to weigh up. And maybe some of these other options were looking more attractive to Thomas Partey than maybe signing a new contract at Arsenal. So I think it would be a blow if, as likely, he is going to leave Arsenal. But I think they've acted quite shrewdly and quite quickly by kind of just getting this Christian Nørgaard deal really far up the line to try and get that sorted while Partey leaves.
Deal with Brentford for the midfielder Christian Nørgaard, and the announcement of Martin Zubimendi continues to get ever closer, with the player in London finalising a deal. Nørgaard, lads, what do we think? Dan, were you surprised by this one? Impressed by what you've seen? Could he be a big player for Arsenal, or is he more of a squad player for you?
I think the latter. I think he's more of a squad player, but I have been really impressed by him over the last 4 seasons in the Premier League. You know, he's grown in influence for Brentford. I think he's been a hugely important player for them. I mean, just to go back to Spurs, you know, he's obviously really close to Thomas Frank, who I think coached him before Brentford at Brøndby and possibly in the Danish youth setup as well. So, you know, I'd have been surprised if he's not been a name that Frank's mentioned to Spurs, but they're well stocked in there. But yeah, I think a canny signing for Arsenal. You know, they've lost Jorginho, who's very, very experienced in the Premier League. Looks like Partey, whose contract expires in a day or two, is not going to agree a new deal. So they're short of experience in there, even with Zubimendi coming in. And Nørgaard just offers a kind of consistency, a level of Premier League experience that Arteta clearly kind of values and wants in the side. You know, he's going to be a kind of player who will always do a sort of 7, 8 out of 10 job for you. And I think Arteta clearly, you know, wants someone like that in the squad.
The more I think about this one, the more it kind of makes sense. Like Jorginho leaving, of course, they need more experience in there. But also when you compare the Arsenal-Tottenham Hotspur situation, and as Dan said there, he probably would have been a name that was mentioned by Thomas Frank. But the direction that Tottenham Hotspur are going is buying these younger players. This guy's 31. Now, maybe it also illustrates the positioning of these two clubs as well, because maybe Arsenal are in a position where they can say, right, yes, we do want to go into the market where we bring in young players who have got high ceilings, but we also in that position where, yes, we've got quite a few of those as well, but we do need experience in this squad as well. And it makes more sense the more I think about it, because you've got the likes of Odegaard, Rice and Zubimendi, who you would expect to start in the starting 11 for Arsenal next season. But to bring on somebody like Christian Nørgaard with all the experience that he's got, I think it is a really, really shrewd signing by them.